Hello, everyone. This is Maggie Klinke, and I'd like to welcome you to this session of the Virtual Summit for Quality Assurance and Training. This is the value of work, whoops, she took my slide away, is the value of work a relic of the past? And this is Nicole Price from Eleveo, who is going to take us through this information. I had a chance to kind of preview a few of these slides, and this looks really interesting. So I'm sure you folks are going to get a great deal out of this. So if you want to download the presentation, of course, remember there's a couple places you can get that. One is at the Virtual Summit website in the agenda page, and you can also download it from the app if you prefer to do that. Of course, we're recording the session, so if you need to go back and pull up some of this fascinating information later, because it is really cool, you will find it in the recorded session on the Virtual Summit website about 24 hours after the session is completed. And also at the end of the session, we ask you if you will be kind enough to do the survey that the session evaluation. Those are really helpful to us in planning for future programs. And also you can do that at the end of the WebEx, or you can do it in the app later if you need to, but just please do it. We appreciate it. Also, at the end of the session, you'll have an opportunity to go to the lounge, and WebEx will redirect you there so that you can continue the conversation with these folks as you need to. So that's an opportunity as well. And while you're there on the site, you probably want to go to the Eleveo sponsor booth and take a look at what they are offering, white papers, case studies, and other kinds of information. And of course, you'll also be registered for their prize. So you want to be sure and do that as well. I also want to be sure everybody's comfortable with the chat. We're going to be interacting through the chat today, just like we have throughout the entire program. So please feel free to interact there. And let me just ask you, if you would, just put in the city where you're attending from today, and we'll know you're out there and that everything is working the way it's meant to. So you should have your chat set to send to everyone so that we can all see what's going on. Okay, here we go. Marietta, Georgia, Uniontown, Pennsylvania, Milford, Connecticut, hello. Amherst, Wisconsin, Melbourne, Florida. All right, so a whole lot of different places, and that's great. We're always, oh, and Canada too, good deal. All right, a couple of little minor announcements I wanted to also mention. The Sponsor Showcase Bingo game starts today, and those entries are due by noon on Thursday, so you want to be sure and do that. We are continuing the Sponsor Showcase quiz, which is different from the bingo, and those are due by Wednesday at the end of the day, and the answers can be found, of course, in the Showcase sponsors booth, so you want to go there and check that out. And I think that you'll find both of these game programs in the special events tab on the site and also in the app. So with all of that, I think we are about ready to go ahead and get started. So so we're getting some information about the Eleveo session here out in the chat. Website there to check out and so forth. So good deal. All right, I'm going to turn this over to Nicole. So take it away.
Awesome. Thank you. And good afternoon to everyone. Hopefully it's the afternoon, but if you are in another time zone that's not the East Coast of the United States, good morning, good evening, good day. I hope you're all having a great Monday so far today. So as I was introduced, my name is Nicole Price, and I am the Director of Product Commercialization and Strategy for Eleveo. So I spent about 10 years in contact centers, first with eBay in their global coaching organization, and then with Radial, which is a large international BPO, where I led their global customer experience program with tools like quality management, voice of the customer, and conversation analytics. Personally, I call myself a data geek with an endless well of questions, and I'm hugely passionate about using data to make better business decisions. As we get started today, I did note that my colleague Rebecca has posted a Hotjar link in the chat today. So we'd encourage each of you to take this brief survey if you can. These surveys help us to put out really cool white paper research. This one's about the state of the contact center that we'll be publishing either late Q4 or early Q1 of 2022, which sounds crazy to say we're that far along in the year already. So who is Eleveo? Eleveo has 20 years of developing workforce optimization software that's simplified for anyone in your organization to use. So if you're having trouble with the complexity of your enterprise level tools, we'd love to have a conversation with you. We've been selected to the Gartner Magic Quadrant 8 times, and we've been recognized by the CRN Partner Program, as well as DMG, who said that we're one to watch. So on July 9th, 2021, after the latest update to the Bureau of Labor Statistics Beverage Curve, the Wall Street Journal posted an article with the title that job openings are at a record high. Why aren't unemployed Americans filling them? So this beverage curve that I've mentioned, it's a graphical representation that measures the relationship between both unemployment and job vacancy rates. It's named after Baron William Henry Beveridge, a British economist and authority on both unemployment and social security. Changes to the beverage curve can be affected by several factors, including how efficiently workers can find new jobs, whether skills mismatches occur, and finally, labor force participation rates. So I want to ask a quick question in the chat. One of the most common talking points that I hear, whether it's on social media, if it's in the news, even in random conversations, is that, ooh, sorry, I went fast, is that Americans are disincentivized to work because of enhanced unemployment and government stimulus benefits. So what we're experiencing as a nation is both high unemployment and job openings, which is the very definition of the beverage curve. And yet employers are struggling to fill jobs. So why is that? I actually heard this statement come out of my husband's mouth one afternoon as we were going on our afternoon walk and talking about our day. So I started to wonder, is it really that simple that people are disincentivized to work? Is that why we're having trouble filling roles? So my question to you is, have you felt this way yourself? Have you caught yourself saying this to your spouse or to a colleague? Is this a common talking point at work? I'm really curious to hear. So if we could just take a quick moment and have you post a quick note in the chat, I'd be interested to see your perspective on this. So are there other contributing factors to the beverage curve's unemployment gap? And that's really what I'm here to talk about today. I want to share research that we've done that talks about several potential contributing factors in understanding whether there's an alternate reason for the job gap we're experiencing, or whether it really truly is as simple as people just being disincentivized to work because of enhanced unemployment and government stimulus payments. So let's talk about the first topic, which is the actual impact of unemployment benefits on employment. Early in the pandemic, Glassdoor's economic research team found that a 10% increase in unemployment benefits only caused a 3.6% decline in applications during the months of March through July 2020. In Missouri, the governor ended enhanced unemployment early because they actually expected a flood of applicants that they thought were staying home collecting enhanced unemployment. And that actually turned out not to be the case at all. In fact, workforce development officials stated that they didn't get the flood of applicants that they expected with the governor's announcement to end the benefit. This is also reflected by Indeed's hiring lab. Indeed looked at job search activity for states where EUI was either ended prematurely or scheduled to end soon, and they found that job search activity was actually down. Indeed said if overly generous EUI benefits were holding back job seekers, then we would expect search activity to increase in states where those benefits had ended. A similar study from Yale University showed that as EUI benefits become more generous, we're seeing employment rise rather than go down, which we wouldn't expect if people were motivated by EUI to stay home. So if people were incented to stay home because of benefits, you would expect the two to grow further apart. So it goes to show that there are actually other factors at play. Lastly, a February 2021 study from the University of Chicago and the JP Morgan Chase Institute shared that unemployment was only marginally lower because of benefit expansion. While data between all of these studies does vary, the one thing that can be commonly said is that economists are generally skeptical that the enhanced unemployment benefits have been the biggest driver of the employment gap, and there are other potential drivers to explore. So the next potential driver we'll take a look at is skills mismatches. So what is a skills mismatch? A skills mismatch is best defined as work experience that doesn't match the needs of the marketplace. For example, you're a seamstress and you're trying to get a job as a coder without any prior training or experience. A study by researchers at Princeton and the University of Texas at Austin found that there were more job vacancies for fields like wholesaling, food services, entertainment, finance, and healthcare than there are unemployed individuals with those skill sets. So when you break down the Bureau of Labor Statistics Beverage Curve of job openings by industry, you also see that these same sectors with the highest numbers of job openings. So in my mind, when I think about the commonalities between these industries, they include things like perhaps non-exempt pay, inconsistent schedules, generally you're on your feet a lot, and you often have to directly interact with the public, which, as all of us in a customer service facing world can agree, that interacting with the public can often be a thankless enterprise. When we break down the BLS job openings and labor turnover survey, also known as JOLTS, these same industries also represent the highest quit rates, which means that these same fields with the biggest gap between the number of people we need and the number of people with skill sets for the jobs also have a higher number of employees that are quitting this type of work. JOLTS documented its overall quit percentage at 2.8%, which may not seem like a large number, but is actually the highest number that it's been since the survey's inception in the year 2000. Of course, as more jobs are offering incentives and signing bonuses, it's easy enough to hop to the more compelling job down the street. So the next theory that we're going to discuss is whether childcare challenges, including homeschooling, have impacted the US jobs market. The Peterson Institute for International Economics studied the impacts of childcare in an analysis from May. By setting up experiments with different variables, the Peterson Institute was able to examine whether adults with and without children were more or less likely to participate in the labor force during the pandemic. And what they found was really interesting. As you might expect, women with young children have left the workforce at a slightly higher rate than other women. Not surprising. However, men with young children have left the workforce at a lower rate than men without young children. So if anyone was impacted by childcare in the last year and change, it tended to be women. The other finding of interest was that the employment rates of parents of young children declined at the lower rate of 4.5% compared to a higher rate of 5.2% among people who are not parents of young children, which means that people with children had an actually higher employment rate than people without children. Overall, the Peterson Institute concluded that the factors responsible for the slow employment recovery and depressed labor supply are issues that are not exclusively related to the struggles of working parents. So earlier we talked about skills mismatches, and now I'd like to talk a little bit about geolocation mismatches. Using data from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York and the Equifax Consumer Credit Panel, the Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland found that more people were leaving urban neighborhoods in 2020 with an average outmigration of 276,000 residents between the months of March and September 2020. Unsurprisingly, the major causes of outmigration were where there may have been a high rate of civil unrest, there were COVID-19 deaths, small business closures, and a high percentage of the population that could work from home. People really just wanted to get out of the city and were taking every opportunity to do so that they could. The flip side of this coin, however, is that as people are moving to more suburban areas, it puts a demand for local services in places that don't really have a labor force to meet this demand. So what this looks like are things like the quiet Starbucks on your corner suddenly has a line around the drive-thru, or maybe it's your new favorite eatery that can't keep normal hours because of low staffing. I know I've seen this one locally, and so I'm sure that you all have as well. This shift in labor force supply leaves urban staffers as well with fewer opportunities as demand shrinks in urban locations that people are moving away from. So this is what creates a geolocation mismatch. Now let's talk about age. And for the purposes of our conversation today, we're going to define older workers as age 55 and over. In this demographic of older workers, 60% of men and 70% of women believe that if they quit their job, they're unlikely to find a comparable job within the next few months, which is actually 7 to 10% higher than how men and women below the age of 55 would respond to that same question. The same study found that when older workers are rehired, their hourly wages are up to 27% lower than their previous job. That's a huge drop. And by January 2021, 2.7 million older workers were out of the labor force than they had been in the previous year. And it's not because they found a job. With high relative rates of job loss and poor employment prospects, as well as the risk of taking such a huge pay cut, the continuing decline in older worker unemployment suggests that this population has actually given up looking for paid work. There is one differentiator, however, and that's for older workers with a college degree. The share of retired workers among adults aged 55 through 64 grew 5% for those without a college education, but actually fell 4% for those with a college education. On the other hand, the proportion of Americans aged 16 through 19 who are working is the highest it's been in years. In May of this year, 33.2% of teenagers, so Americans aged 16 through 19, had jobs, the highest such percentage of teenagers working since 2008. In fact, even personally, my nephew Noah had his first ever job, and guess what? He's age 16 and he worked as a lifeguard this summer. He loved it, right? But he's eager to work because there are job openings. These findings align with Drexel University's Center for Labor Markets and Policy findings that the outlook for teenage employment would sit at about 31.5% for the summer of 2021. In April, the Employment Situation Report from the BLS showed that the US added 266,000 jobs that month, and workers aged 16 through 19 accounted for over 96% of those jobs. What's even more interesting is that according to gusto.com, the top industries that are employing teenagers right now include things like food and beverage, retail, education, sports and recreation, as well as healthcare and social assistance. So if you'll recall from earlier in our conversation, these are the fields that also show the highest number of employment opportunities and also the highest number of quit rates. So teenagers, of course, can be appealing because they're less expensive to hire, they're likely to still be supported by their parents' insurance, and they're more likely to work on short notice because they often don't need to negotiate pay and benefits. So we've looked at the bookend populations of teenagers and older workers. So what does everyone in the middle want? In a study of more than 10,000 knowledge workers, Future Forum by Slack found that flexibility now ranks only second to compensation in determining job satisfaction. In fact, 93% of workers want a flexible schedule, while 76% want a flexible work location. About 66% of respondents wanted a balance between full flexibility and a predictable schedule. More than 80% of workers say they want access to an office, but only for in-person collaboration and team building. The office is just not seen as a place for focused solo work anymore. And yet I hear repeatedly of businesses that continue to try and bring all of their employees back into one location. Unsurprisingly, of course, the benefits of location flexibility range from things like the ability to manage stress, work-life balance, and overall satisfaction at work. So what does this all mean when you put it together? First off, companies that offer remote work are having a much easier time of attracting new and retaining existing employees. Prudential's Pulse of the American Worker survey from April 2021 confirmed that if an employee's company does not offer remote work options long-term, they will look for a company that does. As recently as July 19th, we read of Apple employees' dissatisfaction to return to their physical workspace. And there was a soft internal poll that some of you may have read about that reflected that Apple's lack of workplace flexibility would likely cause 1,100 employees to leave Apple. Now, I'd take a quick pause and think about this, because for many people, working at Apple might be seen as the pinnacle of their professional career. However, 1,100 employees would be willing to give it up just like that to find a job that offers work from home benefits. On LinkedIn, for example, the number of US jobs that allow remote work increased 5 times in 1 year, with these jobs receiving a whopping 25% of all applications. ZipRecruiter saw similar growth in remote jobs, which saw a similar growth 4x in the number of applications compared to roles without remote options. Prudential's Pulse of the American Worker survey also confirmed that up to 26% of respondents had actually switched jobs during the pandemic or plan to switch jobs after the pandemic. Of this group, 72% are rethinking their skill sets. And a Pew Research study from February 2021 showed that nearly 2/3 of unemployed Americans had considered changing their occupation or field of work during the pandemic. Employees leaving high-demand jobs in retail, food service, and so on are actually looking for less stressful positions that are rewarded with higher wages and better benefits, and in many cases with a work-from-home benefit, but are also incentivized by roles offering signing bonuses. Through the 7 days ending June 18th, the percent of Indeed job postings advertising hiring incentives more than doubled. So job seekers looking for hiring incentives on Indeed jumped 134%. It's worth calling out, of course, that hiring bonuses do not necessarily equate to better jobs and better long-term benefits, nor do they necessarily guarantee the tenure of the applicant, In fact, some of the studies that I read said that employees would be better off trying to negotiate a higher starting pay than the short-term benefit of the signing bonus. But of course, companies use it as a way to try and get employees in the door. So I focused much of our session today on how to attract new employees. What are people looking for? Why are people not working? Perhaps even more importantly, though, we should discuss how to retain the employees you already have. It's a lot easier to keep people than find new ones. Table stakes employee experience solutions should include self-paced and instructor-led training, as well as positive reinforcement through coaching and gamification at the minimum. There are also some more non-traditional approaches like leveraging conversation analytics across internal and external channels to better understand what the sentiment is of the workers in your organization. You can also provide dynamic shift bidding as a reward for performance. Employee effort KPIs and desktop analytics can also help organizations to assess pain points of your teammates that may potentially negatively impact your retention as well. We've identified that the youngest and oldest demographics are willing and able to work. So do make sure that your hiring requirements aren't precluding these groups at all, especially if the skills that you're looking for can be coached to. And finally, cloudifying your tech stack is important because it allows you to deprecate your location-dependent premise-based servers. Once you get rid of those premise-based servers, it really opens up a broad reservoir of potential employees for your organization. They can be located in cities, states, and countries that you may not have ever considered hiring from in the past. But that door opens up once you have a cloud-based technology stack. Of course, if you want to know how we can help you better achieve agent and customer experience using any of these tools, please reach out to us. We'll be more than happy to help you. So finally, what can we say? There is absolutely no grand conclusion. We've covered a lot of territory today. And what we can say is that it is time to put to bed generalized comments about disincentivization. These comments simply don't paint the whole picture about the job gap. In fact, it's clear that we're in the midst of a fundamental realignment marked with a high level of uncertainty and considerable complexity. There is a wide range of demographic, macroeconomic, workplace, pandemic-related nuances that have brought us to the point we're at today. We can also say that employee experience has never been more important in retaining the teammates you have today, and every company should be looking hard at their drivers of attrition metrics. Just as the pandemic has given many employees the perfectly reasonable opportunity to rethink what they want for their lives, it has also given companies the chance to reimagine their offerings. Employees and job seekers may be in the driver's seat, but you can be the employer of choice if you know what your job seekers' priorities are. So with that, what I'd love to do is take questions and hear your thoughts. I'm very curious to hear, how many of you have had this perspective in the past and may have reconsidered your priorities now that you've heard this research.
Okay, this is your chance, folks, to use that chat and send in what you've experienced, what you're thinking, help her understand what's going on out there from your point of view. We'll give them a little chance to type out there. It's
They may be trying to wrap their brains around all of the information.
Well, it's certainly a lot of information. You obviously done a lot of research, and there are a lot of charts I'd like to spend more time with to try to understand more.
Sure, and I'd be happy to back up to anything you'd like to revisit since we have a little extra time.
Well, that beverage chart that you started with, I thought was really interesting, but it went by so fast I wasn't sure what I was looking at.
Let me go back to it and I'll share my screen. Okay, so this beverage chart is put out by the US Bureau of Labor Statistics. It is updated on a monthly basis, but it's usually updated about 2 months in arrears, which is why the latest data is for May. I did look at this again about a month ago, and the trend had stayed about the same from the May trend, but they do usually report about 2 months in arrears. So they show you what the job opening rates are by industry with seasonal adjustment. You know, some particular industries like retail, for example, have a very high seasonal fluctuation. And then the beverage chart can be broken down into other demographics like age, location. And so if you go onto USBLS's website, there's a real great wealth of information available on employment and job vacancies by industry and by other demographics as well.
Yeah, some of these are spiking big time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just the ones we discussed, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Dawn had a thought here. See if I can find it again. Have great benefits and competitive pay. Seems to be a thought that perhaps would help. What do you think of that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you know, it's not just about great benefits and competitive pay. It's also going to be about the culture that you set within your own organization, that your employees feel like they are valued, and certainly pay and benefits are a part of that. How you engage with your agents, whether you keep your pulse on how they're feeling and you do your best to mitigate that, that you're competitive relative to other employers in the area. There are many different impacts on retaining your workforce, but I mean, certainly a great place to start is benefits and pay.
As she says, they're in a small town where jobs are not as plentiful, so our contact center stays full as we offer great benefits and competitive pay.
That's great.
Yeah, when you don't have any competition, it's kind of helpful.
Yeah.
Let's see. April says it's hard to believe that the lack of applicants is actually due to such a low percentage from
Right.
unemployment benefits. Yeah, because everybody's saying, oh, well, it's all about the government stimulus, but that doesn't seem to hold up with the statistics. So that's
That's correct.
interesting.
That's correct. And I mean, I'll just put this slide back up really fast. This is one of the main slides that covers the individual research studies that I worked with in the study. And more or less, we're seeing that if there's any impact, like Glassdoor, for example, their economics team saw a very, very marginal impact from enhanced unemployment. And Ed states Missouri is not the only one. At the time this study that we put together was done, Missouri was the first state to take away the EUI because they, as I mentioned, thought that everybody was just sitting at home collecting benefits. And so they thought if we end it early, then we'll see a bump up in people who are looking for jobs. But what they found is that there wasn't a change after they removed the EUI. And the same thing was found after the fact in other states that removed the EUI benefit because they thought the same thing. And they found the same thing, which is that there wasn't the bump that they were expecting. So same thing, you know, Yale University, JP Morgan Chase, Indeed, Glassdoor, all of these companies are doing studies on the impact of EUI and benefits, and they're just not seeing that as a major impact on employment. It's really, you know, as I said at the end, people have had a lot of time to stop and think, you know, I've lost friends and family, not me personally, but this is what people are saying. I've lost friends and family. Is this, you know, is this job where I'm unhappy and maybe not being compensated well enough and I have to go into an office every day, is this really worth my life? Is this how I want to spend my time? Or would I rather be in a place where I can have better work-life balance, where I could spend more time with my friends and family, where I can spend more time doing the things that make me feel whole and happy. And that's really where people are. Like, this pandemic has really, I mean, to use a coin, a phrase, an existential crisis. You know, people are thinking about what they want for their lives and how work helps support that rather than living to work or working to live.
Yeah, I think that says it very nicely. It's interesting. Michael out there says he's curious. Oops, where is it? I lost him already. Curious of what any of the attendees are experiencing. Are they having issues with attracting new employees? So if y'all would look at that and see if you can answer his question and tell him whether you're struggling with that or not. Barry says it is possible that government benefits allowed for individuals to experience getting paid at home, and that is a catalyst for the trend,
Yeah.
but not the root cause for workers returning to
Right.
work. Now they want flexibility with pay rather than just pay.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly right.
interesting state. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's one of those things that, the contact center industry had a few work at home opportunities. In every center there was typically not more than about 10%. And it was a big deal if you got to work at home. And then all of a sudden it's like 95% and it worked. And I think many corporations were surprised at how well it
Yeah.
worked. So that's
But at
good.
the same time, most of those companies weren't prepared for work at home strategies. They maybe had it on their long-term roadmap, but the pandemic really amplified that and really quickened everybody's tech roadmaps very, very quickly. So, that's a benefit for companies like ours and our competitors because there's a greater demand for our technology. But there are, you know, at the time that the pandemic hit, I was still working at Radial, the BPO that I mentioned, and we already had a work from home agenda. We were starting to expand where we could source people from, and by cloudifying all of our technology, we were able to safely send people to work from home in places that we hadn't hired from previously because our on-site, our hard sites, we'd stopped being able to fulfill roles in. And so cloudification helped us to really expand and hire people in new countries, hire people in new states, target demographics like military families who are constantly moving and can't work in a site, helped us target students. I mean, really expanded our ability to hit our SLAs and to hire our as needed. So I can't emphasize that enough. If you haven't started that process, I very much encourage you to have a conversation with us so that we can help you figure it out. Because it's so important, especially as this direction isn't abating. It's only continuing to move forward with full steam.
Mm-hmm. I think there's some truth to that. Andrea says our company sells European car parts, both for new and classic cars, and we've been seeing a lot of applicants come from dealerships versus other sales jobs. People aren't buying new cars much. Well, partly that's because they can't get the parts to make the new cars, and so they run out. I saw something yesterday that said that there aren't any new cars out on the lots, and it's like I used to have 100, now I have 5.
Mm.
So it's really been a tough time for car dealers, that's for sure. Mm.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. And
Yeah,
it's great
that's a
that they
different.
can move at least within the same vertical, which is helpful because you have folks coming from a dealership who have experience already, and they're able to. I mean, it seems to me like, and I could be wrong about this, but making that move would give better career growth too, which is, while I didn't speak at length about it in this study, I did read a fair amount about people looking for upward mobility so that they're not just hopping from job to job, but being able to dig in on a subject matter and to grow their career within that. So I would say that's very much speaking to that.
So training and development, and the willingness to hire people who need training and development is
Mm.
probably an opportunity as well, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Well, and not
definitely.
to mention that providing both synchronous and asynchronous learning helps empower your staff, your employees, your teammates to feel like, I'm being given growth opportunities, whether they're directly relevant or adjacent to the work that I do. And that's, a great way to reinvest um, in your staff, right? Because
Right.
the more you can coach and develop and grow them, the more traction and stickiness they have within your organization. You would always hope that you can bring them up in your own company. That would be the most ideal situation. But at the very least, you're helping them to grow and develop for their personal development and perhaps take on, promotive roles in other organizations, which would also be awesome.
Yeah, and I think I've seen evidence that large corporations are doing more tuition reimbursement and other kinds of development beyond their own training, in recent times. Again, another benefit.
And it doesn't have to be anything as complicated as tuition reimbursement. Yes, as the study has shown, people are going back to school and considering career path changes, but it can be as simple as having brief little modules on like Six Sigma, for example, letting somebody explore getting a white belt or a yellow belt in asynchronous training between contacts, or maybe giving them 15 minutes of coaching a week to spend that time in, an asynchronous module that's adjacent to what they do, but not directly relevant. So it doesn't have to be as full scale as, um, tuition reimbursement. That's certainly lovely, but requires a much larger time commitment that people may or may not want. But having those asynchronous modules are great ways for people to feel like there's an investment,
Yeah.
and still getting that learning in.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that, it's an opportunity many people took advantage of when they were unemployed, was to go out and try to get new skills so they could get
That's
a better
right.
job than they had. So
That's right. And they're very easy to get these days.
yeah, absolutely. Lots of stuff is available online, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's see if we've got anything else out there. Yeah, Andrea, the one about the car says, let's see, wait a minute. She says, skills are definitely transferable. Our company is a lot less commission based. Yeah, I think that's another area that's probably shifted a bit too, that less payment by commission and more by actual, time on the job, kind of normal shift work kind of things.
It's about the
Good thing.
consistency.
Yep. Yep. All right. I think that's all I see in the chat at this point. Anybody else have additional questions or issues, thoughts? I think this has been really, really educational. I mean, this was really a great session, and I really appreciate it, Nicole. I think the research you have done and all the different sources of information are really, really worthwhile, and it kind of puts to bed they're all lazy and sitting at home taking the government,
They're
money.
certainly not. They're certainly not, but people are reconsidering what they want for their lives. And that's really important. When I'm thinking back even to my own parents' generation, who had the perspective that you go to one company and you work for the same company and then you retire with that company, and maybe on your 20th anniversary they give you a watch, right?
Oh yeah,
But
the gold watch
and
syndrome.
they would stay, yeah, they would stay with the company whether or not it was an ideal fit for them from a personal fulfillment standpoint. And that's really one of the catalysts of the whole pandemic. If there's one great thing to come out of all of this, it's that we've really been able to take a step back and reassess what we want for our lives and have more personal fulfillment. And I think that if companies can get out of their own way, just to say it, then I think that they'd have a much better chance of hiring people that are engaged and willing to stay, if they're being treated like actual human beings. And I also want to give a shout out to Michael Stuhlreier on this call, who is one of my key colleagues that helped me put this all together.
Well, that's great. I think this is wonderful. So y'all can continue this conversation, ask additional questions, or get additional information from the lounge on the Virtual Summit website. So as this session is ending, we'll be redirecting you over there if you wish to go there, and that will give us a chance to get additional contact and information. And I'm sure there's more over at your booth in the showcase as well. So thank you, everyone. We really appreciate your time.
Everyone.
It's been a great session. Thank you so much.
Thank you.